Yes, you. Welcome to the You're Not Getting Any Younger podcast, a podcast for people who want to disrupt their lives for a good reason, to make it count. I'm your host, Jen Glantz, and every week I'll drop a new episode with stories from real people just like you, who woke up one morning and decided to make big changes, starting with small things. We'll cover topics like entrepreneurship, love, failure, and self-care. Hey, you're not getting any younger, so let's make this an adventure. Ready? This episode of the You're Not Getting Any Younger podcast is brought to you by two of my newest projects. If you like cool things inside of your inbox that are also free, check out my two new newsletters. One is called Odd Jobs Newsletters, where I break down the oddest, weirdest, and coolest jobs out there, how to get started, how to do them, and how much do they pay. Check it out at youareodd.com. That's youareodd.com, just like you would turn to a friend and say, hey, you are odd. That's the domain name of this newsletter. And the second newsletter is called The First Years of Marriage, thefirstyearsofmarriage.com. It's a newsletter that really shines a light on the conversations, challenges, and changes that begin when the honeymoon ends. Check them out. Hey, any youngers, it's me, your host, Jen Glantz, back with another episode of the You're Not Getting Any Younger podcast. I'm coming at you from my tiny apartment in Brooklyn, New York. I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but our place is really, really tiny. We live in a one-bedroom, so it's not that tiny, but it's definitely about 500 square feet, which is pretty small. Don't even get me started on how much we pay to live in this tiny box. But it's a pretty small apartment, and before the pandemic, it was fine because Adam and I were hardly ever home, but during the pandemic, it's definitely gotten a little uncomfortable. We both have desks. I have a desk that I put in our bedroom, which is like crazy because a desk can hardly fit in the bedroom. Adam has a desk he put in the living room, and then of course we have Goofy things everywhere. Goofy's our dog. We have workout mats and weights everywhere. We just have everything everywhere, so it feels really small. And the entire pandemic, I complained about that because when we were stuck in this apartment with nowhere else to go, life sort of felt like we were living inside of a dollhouse. But here's the thing, our lease is up and we have to decide within like the next week if we're gonna stay in this apartment or if we're gonna move. Where would we move? I don't know. That's a giant question mark. I don't know if that means within New York. I don't know if that means somewhere else. I don't know. But the thought of leaving this tiny, annoying apartment has made me tremendously grumpy. This place has so many memories. It means so much to me for so many reasons. I mean, we moved in during a very tough time in my life, so I feel like the walls sort of held me and hugged me. And then, of course, the pandemic happened. But even before that, we got engaged living in this apartment. We got married living in this apartment. We got Goofy in this apartment. We've settled into this apartment, and it's the first place Adam and I have ever had for ourselves. Before we moved here, we were living on the road for 2 years, living in new places every month. So this is sort of also our first apartment. And I've been telling Adam, because Adam sort of wants to leave, I sort of want to stay, and Adam is like, Jen, I cannot stay in this apartment for another year. And I'm like, why not? It's huge. We can clear stuff out. It's so big. And I'm like arguing in defense of this apartment that I spent so long complaining about. It's so like me to fall in love with the feeling of missing something right before it's gone. And that's exactly what's happening here. And I honestly can't decide. I'm like venting to you, my dear listeners. I can't decide if I want to stay in this apartment because I love it or I want to stay in this apartment because I am so sad to let it go and to let all of the memories go that fill these walls. And I think about people who leave houses after living there for 30 years. I mean, my parents left their house after we lived there. I mean, we've moved multiple times, but that's sad. That's hard. But for some reason, this feels impossible. So I don't know where we're going to move. I don't know if we're going to stay. I'll definitely let you know when I know. It feels so much pressure to make that decision. Anyway, talking about pressure and life and hard things. One of the things I wanted to talk about in this episode today is how to have honest conversations with your friends. Friendship is something that I've talked about on this podcast many times. I interviewed a friendship coach one time on this podcast. And also the art of vulnerability is something I've talked about over the years as well. I had a friend break up with me a couple of years ago. This was my best friend for 8 years. We were practically inseparable. This was my everything. I basically told her I wanted to make her my future maid of honor like the week before she broke up with me. We were always seen together. We were doing everything together. And practically out of the blue, she sat me down and told me she didn't want to be my friend anymore. And that burned. That pain did not subside for quite a while. I mean, this was probably about 3 or 4 years ago at this point, and it was really, really tough to let that go and to get through that feeling. But one of the positives, and I always believe that a positive comes from a negative. I know that sounds cliche, but it is often true. One of the positives of that situation was that I took inventory on myself as a friend. I sat down and I started to look at, okay, what do I do well as a friend? And of course, when you're feeling down about yourself, there's nothing on that list. But as you really start to open up and look at yourself, you see about 3 or 5 things, maybe more if you're feeling good, that you do well as a friend. But then I made a list of the things I could work on. And one of those things was being more vulnerable, being more honest, being more open. I'm a complicated person. Maybe that's how you feel about yourself, but I not only feel that way, but I have been told that by pretty much everybody in my life that I am so complicated. I've also been told that I am filled with so many emotions. My therapist has told me that I have more emotions than most people, which is like quite a thing for that person to say to you, right? Like a therapist who sees people all day, every day tells you that you have more emotions, but okay. I also can be really moody. I can be really private and really secretive and very much in my own world. And what I mean by that is like, I live life so independently. I do that how I work, how I keep my thoughts, how I keep my feelings. And only really Adam has access to that because he's around me. And over the years, they've definitely opened up. But from a friendship perspective, I keep my friends out of all of that mess. Like I don't talk to them about work or what I'm working on or how I'm feeling about things. And I think the biggest reason why I shut them out of that is because I spend pretty much every hour of the day thinking about those things. And when I see them, I don't want to drag them into that. Plus, I'm complicated, right? And everything about me is complicated. And I don't want to bring my friends into that. So I've been known to not really talk to my friends about what's going on or what I'm working on and sort of keeping them out of everything. But the problem arises with social media because then they'll see things I post on social media when something's completed, when something's done, and they'll want to know why they didn't hear about it first, which I totally understand, right? But it just definitely adds complication here. Notice the theme of the podcast is complicated. So once that friend broke up with me, I took inventory on myself. I set out to try to be a better friend to everybody in my life. And to do that, one of the things I knew I could change and could work on was to let people be more in my life, be more included on what's going on, but to also work on having more honest conversations with people. When I'm feeling something, say it. When I'm confused about something, share it. When I'm not doing well, open up about that. And it hit me more recently that I think I'm doing a really good job of that. And there's been a couple of instances in the past couple of months where I have felt like I could show up for very honest conversations with people in ways I didn't think I could do before. For example, I have a friend. I didn't know. We're not broken up. I still have this friend. It's a really good friend of mine. And I got this weird sense that something was off between us, that maybe she was mad at me, that things were just like weird. And rather than ruminating on it and being upset about it and crying about it and being anxious about it, I sent the person a text and I said, look, I love you. I feel like something is off. Can we talk? And this friend immediately called me. We talked through it. They said there was nothing off, but we just talked through why we were feeling that way. And we ended the conversation and it was over and done and everything was okay. For me to text that, for me to be so self-aware of the situation and to get the words down of how to approach it was a huge step for someone like me who probably would have avoided it, who might have started acting weird, and maybe would have damaged the friendship just because I was so scared the friendship was damaged. Another instance of that is a friend was reaching out a couple of weeks ago, texting me a lot of things and trying to talk. And I was obviously very distant. I was going through a weird time, so I wasn't on my phone very much. And they called me out and they said, Jen, are you mad at me? Is something wrong? And I was able, and this is something I wasn't able to do in the past, I was able to text them back and say, look, nothing is wrong. I'm not upset with you. I'm just going through a really odd time right now. I'm not feeling great. Here's why. And because of that, I'm just trying to be off of my phone more. So I'm sorry I missed your text. It's nothing about you. I'm just going through a weird phase in my life or time of the year. I don't know, whatever. And that helped us get back on track with the friendship. There's been a couple more instances like that. One that was extremely personal that I'm not going to go into, but a friend called me with some news that was sad about, something that she was uninviting me from something. And I had an open and honest conversation with her that I don't think I could have had many years ago. I think many years ago, I would have let my emotions override it, or I would have hidden how I felt. But in this situation, I felt like we could have a really open and honest conversation. So I want to give you 3 steps to have more honest conversations with people in your life, especially if that doesn't come natural to you. So many of us are people pleasers. So many of us just want to not have drama. They just want to go on with their lives without wrestling any feathers or anything like that. But oftentimes what happens again is then you're misleading the friendship. Then people don't know how you feel. So here's 3 ways to have just more honest conversations with the people in your life. Number 1. Process. Don't react. Meaning, when you're feeling sad, angry, scared, depressed, unhappy, worried, all of these things about the friendship or about a situation or just about yourself in life, process over react. Oftentimes we feel this sudden need to just share how we feel automatically, voice our opinion without processing anything. So if someone texts you, hey Jen, are you upset with me? Or you want to text somebody, I'm so mad at you, make sure you give yourself a buffer time. I personally need a 48-hour buffer to process. What is your process time? Some of you, it might be 5 minutes. Others of you, it might be an hour. Some of you, it might be a week. Never apologize for your processing time, for how long it takes you to process situations. Instead, communicate that and know you have that. If I'm in a situation with the person and I am upset with them and they want a response as to why, I might say to them, look, I'm just processing things right now. Let me get back to you in a couple of days. I don't want to say something I don't mean in the moment. That's okay. You're allowed as a human being to process things. So step number 1 is to understand, based on being self-aware and knowing yourself, what your process time is. And some situations you might be able to process super fast, and some situations you might need time. Take that time. Number 2, and this has helped me so much, is to write out what you want to say and what you have to say before you say it. So when I'm approaching these honest conversations, rather than just spitballing or improvising or going off of how I feel in my heart and in my head, I know I have to come to the table as organized as possible. Just like if I was preparing to present at a meeting in my job, I would come with an agenda, with bullet points, a PowerPoint presentation, the whole 9 yards. Now, I'm not saying do that in these situations, but I am saying at least have a bullet point list of the things you want to bring up to that person. And why that's important is when you stay organized, you're more able to not only be able to communicate how you feel, but do it in a clear, concise kind of way. So step 1 is processing. Step 2 is writing out, not word for word, but at least bullet points of what you want to say in that honest conversation. And finally, and this one might feel weird, this one might sound weird, but you're gonna have to practice. You don't want the first time you've ever said these words to be on the phone call. Why? Because when you're trying to have an honest conversation and you're nervous about something, you might back out of being honest. You might instead become protective and say, oh, don't worry about it. It's okay. I still love you, and not be able to open up. So practice these things you want to say so that you can approach these conversations in that powerful, well thought out and honest way. That right there is how to have an honest conversation with your friends. And by the way, if you've never done an inventory before where you look at yourself and think about what you do well as a friend and what you can improve on, I highly recommend you do that because it helps you become super self-aware, which is always so important in life, in friendship, in any relationship that you have, especially the relationship that you have with yourself. Until next time, all my love, Jen Glantz. And by the way, if you like this show, can you rate it, review it, subscribe to it, all of those things? It means the world. My goal by the end of the year is to hit 200 episodes, and we're on our way to do that, and 200 reviews. So if you're listening to this on iTunes, on the Apple Podcast app, please, pretty please, me and Goofy would be so happy if you just scroll down and left us a review. We're inching closer and closer to that 200th review every day, and your help truly matters. Thanks so much, my friend. I'll be back next week with a brand new episode just for you. Hey, you. Thank you for listening to the You're Not Getting Any Younger podcast. There are hundreds of thousands of pods out there, so thank you for listening to this one. You can find the show notes for this week's episode up on our website, anyyounger.com. Subscribe, rate, and review the You're Not Getting Any Younger podcast on iTunes so that other ears around the world can listen too. Oh, and join our secret You're Not Getting Any Younger Facebook group, where over 1,000 people are talking about how to disrupt their lives, for good reason, to make it count. Until next week, all my love, Jen Glantz.